Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation as part of the Industry Insight webinar series. The topic today is Moving to Managed Technologies, a Key Industry Trend. Speaking today will be Chris Cardinal from Abacus. With over 20 years in a senior management role, Chris has been responsible for very small to very significant teams in startup and large organizations. Comfortable with the technical crowd and the layman, Chris can translate complex issues into clear solutions. He is a recognized expert on development strategies, implementations, and lifecycle management. For the last 5 years, he has been focused on development in a variety of cloud technologies and platforms, most recently Amicus Online. The Industry Insight webinar series is hosted by the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center. To stay updated on upcoming webinars or view previous videos, visit ambar.org/industryinsight. You can also stay updated on legal technology news through our blog, lawtechnologytoday.org. The presentation today will be followed by a Q&A. Please enter your questions into the question box in the webinar panel on the right side of your screen. All questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. We are recording this webinar, and we will be sending the video in a follow-up email in a few days. We will also post the video on our blog, which again is lawtechnologytoday.org. Thank you all for joining us today, and we'll now begin the webinar.
All right. Hello, everyone. As Rose just said, my name is Chris Cardinal, and this is Moving to Managed Technologies. So our agenda today, a few words about me, though I think the introduction serves its purpose. A review of the legal landscape and as it evolves over time. Some of the solution vendors, or some of the solutions coming from vendors that meet that evolution, and what does managed environments mean? So this is really going to be a presentation about demystifying all the acronyms out there and what things really mean when we're talking about managed versus unmanaged environments. All right, so a little bit about me. 25 years in technology. I've been around for a reasonably long time. I'm the EVP here at Abacus, in charge specifically of all the software that Abacus produces, and that means Amicus Attorney, Amicus Online, Abacus Law, and Abacus Accounting, along with some other pieces. I was previously the CTO of Amicus Attorney itself for the last 12 years, and I've been at the company for 12 years. And before that, a long time ago it appears, I was the VP of R&D for PC Docs and Hummingbird International, which was another legal vendor. So, straight into the subject, the evolution of the legal information environment. So we're going to be talking about some cyber threats and how they are emerging, the emergence of those threats, some new disruptive business models that may be affecting your firm and certainly are affecting the industry, some organizational structures that have been changing from within a law firm, compliance requirements, some of which are not new, some of which may be, and finally the requirement for ubiquity and what that means. And I'll go through each one in turn. Emerging cyber threats. So we've heard a lot about this on the news. There's numerous sites that get hacked every week, it seems. And one wonders what they're actually looking for, and how could a law firm, be it a small firm, large firm, medium-sized firm, why would they be targets? Well, essentially what cyber criminals want are these things. They want patent and insider information if you happen to be handling an M&A. They want healthcare data if you happen to have that kind of information on your files, either as custom fields or some specific information you're storing about your clients that may relate to some medical matter. Case strategy. This is more specific, especially around litigation. Someone may be paying someone to find out how you're thinking about a specific case. Personal information for employees, clients, and vendors, mostly so that they can then do identity theft. Financial information. Many law firms, and I've seen this in the past, I've seen this through experience, many law firms will store credit cards on file. That is the actual credit card number, expiration date, that sort of information on various pieces of data in the application they are using, and that's precisely the kind of information that could be very useful to cyber criminals. And finally, hostages. So yeah, cyber criminals not only want your information, but they also want to charge you for your own information, and this is called ransomware. where your files, your hard drive is held ransom or held hostage by a third party. Essentially, all this kind of information is monetized. That's the whole point. Some of it may be some industrial or legal espionage, if you like. For the vast majority of the cases, though, it's all about money. They just want your money. And you either have to pay it out or you lose it. In the case of the credit cards, they can resell the credit card numbers. So what kind of vulnerabilities does a law firm typically have? These are, firstly, simple access protocols. What I mean by that is very, very simple passwords, very simple ways of getting into the system. No encryption of sensitive data. Most of the data in a law firm is stored in the form of documents. And those documents are almost never encrypted, which means that they're clear text, anybody can see them. In the same way, many pieces of information flow through the email system. And emails, again, generally are not encrypted, and certainly not their attachments. The result is that you have this clear information that has great value and therefore is a great temptation to a cyber criminal. Open networking environments. Very easy to break into your router. Very easy to break into your machines to figure out what's on them, and then place a little listening device that allows them to basically in real time figure out what you're doing and filter out the good stuff such that they can resell it. Unmonitored equipment, and finally, most importantly in the end, naive users. This is the epitome of the phishing attack, where you receive some sort of email from some guy in Nairobi offering you millions of dollars if you're going to do, if you can only do this one little thing for him. Or some sort of email that says, please click on this and your Amazon.com account will receive this amount of a credit. These sorts of naive user attacks are especially dangerous because no matter how much protection you build into your system, how clever you are, a naive user will almost certainly undo it. Essentially, and this is the key point of any kind of cyber threat, if you have an email system, if you are able to use email, you are therefore vulnerable to threats. Along the same landscape, and perhaps even more dangerous, if one, or more threatening in some ways, is disruptive business models. This is a trend we're seeing here at Abacus. So many things are changing. So many law firms are changing the traditional model, how they make money essentially, how they monetize their lawyers, and are going to what one would call kind of novel setups. One of the key ones that we've seen over the last little while is online legal service providers. So companies like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer that essentially provide everything but over the web. No more bricks and mortar, following in the footsteps of Amazon and some of the other providers out there. Another really important one is offshore. So this is becoming quite a big thing in the US, where the law firm actually has two components. One is registered in some state in the US, and the actual people doing all the heavy lifting, if you like, the transactional work, are offshore, and normally a jurisdiction that's way cheaper, like the Philippines. In this way, this model allows them to maximize on the low value, if you like, but high volume legal transactions that are out there. Another one that's really quite novel is the principle of using a subscription service as a mechanism by which you can pay for legal representation. So this is essentially, and these are called legal representations as a service, LRAS sites. These are essentially where you would subscribe to a lawyer, to a legal service, and make use of it over the course of the month. And then you can go month to month as you need it. Another very important trend that we're seeing is service fee versus time. So more and more so, clients are demanding that a given service be not paid for, be not measured or metered by time, i.e. how many minutes or how many hours it took to actually do the work, but as a flat fee. And we're seeing it here in our own applications, where we're getting more and more requests to get, how do I say, more more esoteric, more exotic in the way fees can be posted, such that they can better respond to their customers' requirements for fee-based billing. Another interesting kind of novelty is secondment firms and advice companies, where essentially it's no longer so much of a law firm, but as a network of lawyers that are placed as general counsels or regional heads of regional lawyers or regional heads in a legal department, and so they're not really working. They're working more like a personnel agency, and much less so like a law firm, like your traditional law firm. Another interesting kind of development is a democratization of law, where because of the cost being what it is, it's so expensive in fact these days, especially if you're in a moderate income bracket, to get access to lawyers and law firms, that a great number of websites have gone online to offer the kind of legal advice that used to be only reserved to for law firms and to people who could pay for them. Even more perhaps challenging in the future is the concept of commoditization. That is to say, those legal transactions which are generally high volume but low value in the sense that it's repetitive work have tended to be commoditized over the last 10 to 15 years. And this is what one can call the Walmarting or the Costcoing of law, where, for example, a company like Access Law actually sits inside of Walmart and is now offering fee-based legal services at a much reduced cost. And we'll get back to that cost notion in a minute. And finally, perhaps most esoterically and exotically, is the use of artificial intelligence. That is to say, robots or really intelligent computer software programs that can mimic some of the work that a lawyer currently does. None of the high-level thinking processes, but most of the simplified work like e-discovery, like document review, can now be done by artificial intelligence at obviously much less cost. We're also seeing new organizational structures. So things like the accordion practice. And the accordion practices are basically law firms that grow and compress, maybe month to month based on need. And so they have a network of lawyers that they can call upon to do short-term, part-time work, and depending on how many clients they have. So obviously, this is affecting the the bottom line of the law firm. It's affecting its cost structure, and that's why it's becoming more and more prevalent. The other thing that has become very common is a virtual law office, where in fact there isn't a physical office. There isn't even a real entity. There's a series of lawyers that are sharing a name and a website and some basic communication technology, but essentially live in their own workspaces, normally at home, and so work on a kind of a queuing system based on the amount of cases that are in front of them, and often and generally will only get paid for the hours worked or for the fees that they've been able to get. Another thing we found, and we see this throughout the thousands upon thousands of law firms that both Amicus and Abacus have in their stable, we're seeing many firms that are flattening the hierarchy, where the traditional partner-associate relationship is going away, in which you basically have contributors to the law firm, and that goes hand in hand, in fact, with an entrepreneurial mentality. So much less law firm as a white shoe kind of organization, but rather now this is just another business. This is another kind of business that needs to be made more profitable, that needs to attack the bottom line. And of course, following along the idea of making it more profitable, one sees a significant rise in the advertising dollars, the amount of money that law firms are spending to make themselves visible both on the web and in the internet sphere and the Twitter sphere, in Facebook, and across all the other mediums actually, or media, that people are regularly consulting for law advice. In the same context, there have always been, but now there seems to be always more compliance requirements. And clearly, we have the ABA model for client-lawyer relationships. We have audits for trust management, new regulations around HIPAA. If you happen to be a lawyer for medical malpractice, for example, your HIPAA requirements might be quite significant. And finally, if you are accepting payments, so credit card payments, you are therefore compliant or need to be compliant to PCI, which is the standard imposed upon anybody who's managing credit card data and that's a standard imposed by Visa and all the credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, Discovery, and Amex. So this set of compliance requirements goes hand in hand with that idea of your cyber threats, because in fact, if you are vulnerable, then you're probably not in compliance, and this is a significant problem. And finally, and this is something that usually comes from the lawyers themselves and the paralegals and the secretaries, is the notion of ubiquity. People don't work just in the office now. They work all the time everywhere. Not necessarily 24 hours a day, but they'll want to be able to access their case files. They want to be able to access their client information in all places, from all four screens. And four screens here being my laptop, my desktop, my tablet if it exists, and finally my cell phone. And of course, they're going to be doing it from everywhere, on the road, client offices, in court. And it's not enough that you can get just a subset. You want all of it all the time. Sometimes instant gratification isn't fast enough. And finally, you wanted 24/7, 365. And this raises more issues on the technology side, because to be able to get this kind of access, this kind of ubiquity, you're now asking for a lot of infrastructure. Infrastructure that can be very expensive to produce, to create, and to maintain. So in sum, some of the key trends that we've been seeing and that are affecting our products as we go to market. There are many threats to your law practice. There's criminal, obviously. There's financial, from disruptive business models. There's organizational, other people thinking that maybe there's a better way of doing it. And then there's the operational side. Essentially, and this is maybe a bit of how do I say, a bit of advice, but not so much advice, but just something we've noticed. A law firm to be successful needs to focus on the client and move up the value chain, because some of the simple legal transactions will be commoditized and have already been. And that leads us, therefore, to our true piece of advice, or our true strategy, which is to leave IT to the experts, or as I like to say, leave it to the experts. Law firms are not inherently experts in technology, so why do they pretend to be so? Why do they have their own servers? Why do they have their own technical people when they could leave it to the experts for much lower cost? Especially if you're a small, very small, or micro firm, or a small firm or medium-sized firm, the cost-benefit is, well, it's hard to justify, and we'll be talking about that in a few slides. There are solutions out there, many vendors with different approaches, and as I said, it's an alphabet soup. So it's IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, DaaS, hybrids, crossbreeds. It's a real soup, and I'll go through each one so that at least you can position yourself in your mind. When somebody says to you, SaaS, you'll know what it is, and DaaS, you'll know what it is. Essentially, all these are approaches to managing your technology. In a completely unmanaged universe, you're responsible for everything. You're responsible for the hard drive, you're responsible for the network, you're responsible for the server, for the router, absolutely everything. If you find yourself a vendor that is an IaaS or infrastructure as a service vendor, they'll take on this set of blocks. So networking, you won't need to worry about that. Storage, they'll provide all the hard drive space you need. They'll provide your servers, the physical machines, and they'll provide what's called virtualization. And that's a mechanism where you can put many virtual machines on top of one real machine, one real bare metal machine. Kinds of vendors in this space are Rackspace, Microsoft, Amazon, DigitalOcean. This is the basic. Of course, there's no application here. There's very few services, but at least at this point, all you need to get access to that virtual machine that's up there somewhere in the cloud is a laptop and your own router and your own networking. But you don't need to worry about storage. You don't need to worry about having a big server in your on-premise site. Now, the platform as a service, also called PaaS, provides a little bit more. It will provide the operating system, so that could be Windows, that could be Linux. It'll provide various middleware and runtime, i.e. basically give you a real virtual machine, a system you can log into more or less. All right. The kinds of vendors in this space are Salesforce with the Heroku product, LongJump, again Windows, Azure, again Amazon and Google. And just as you can probably imagine, as you move from one to the other, you're going up a price point. So everyone's a little bit more expensive, but of course they do more. The next one, the most popular one, and the most well-known one, let's say, is software as a service. And that's where you get all the stuff that I just talked about, basically an entire infrastructure, plus the ability to have application-specific data in the application. So this is the app that normally is accessed via web protocol, so via a browser. And some of the vendors here are well known to lawyers. So Bill for Time, Chrometa, Amicus Online, one of ours, Clio, one of the competitors, Rocket Matter, Dropbox, NetDocuments. They'll tend to be verticalized. So for example, Clio, Rocket Matter, and Amicus Online are very verticalized to the legal industry. Dropbox and NetDocuments tend to be more horizontal. There are many vendors in this space, but they essentially all follow the same model that you see here. They add on top of all the other stuff that the IaaS and PaaS vendors provide, they will add application and data. They'll also almost certainly make use of the vendors that I just described. So, for example, Amicus Online uses Microsoft Azure, Clio uses Amazon, and Dropbox used to use Amazon, now uses its own data centers, but they're essentially the same. The last category, and in some ways, in many ways, the most complete category, is something called desktop as a service. And that's not simply, and then again at the very top is the new box called desktop. That's not simply just having the application, but it's actually having your entire desktop, everything you guys see right now. You're all looking at a desktop, looking at my screen, and listening to me. Everything would be virtualized in the private cloud, in a cloud environment, such that the only thing that you would need now is the very simplest connecting device, and that could be a Chromebook, that could be your iPad, that could be just about anything that is able to connect to this desktop out there somewhere in the cloud. And once you're there, it's as if you had your own complete desktop. You would have all your applications, all your printing devices. You would be able to scan. You could have as many applications as you want, including some applications that have nothing to do with the vendor who may be selling you the desktop as a service product. In this category, therefore, there are Amazon Workspaces, VMware, Citrix, and then there's Abacus Private Cloud. There are a few others, but these are the most important ones that we know of, at least that I know of, in the space. Again, the big difference here is that your entire networking environment, your entire computing environment is reproduced in the cloud. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Abacus Private Cloud because it's the one I know best since it's, well, mine. But what's important to understand it is in many ways representative of the others with some key differences. As lawyers, you probably are already using practice management software in one form or another, either Abacus or Amicus or some competitor. Or what's important to realize is that, of course, that's just part of the solution. It's just one thing, as you almost certainly know, right? It doesn't include Word, and it doesn't do PowerPoint, and it doesn't include your 365, your Office 365, or your email provider. There's a whole lot of stuff that it doesn't include. Plus, it doesn't provide you infrastructure. One of the things we encounter very often when we're trying to sell software, when we're trying to support software, is that many lawyers tend to have older, more obsolete infrastructure. That is, computers that are very old, versions of the OS that are very old, of the operating system that's very old, etc. And they also tend to have lots of applications. So as I say, United Nations like many applications that need to all work more or less seamlessly together and do so and do so not necessarily well. Limited accessibility. Unless you've invested in some significant infrastructure, you're not going to be able to access it from your cell phone. You're not going to be able to get that data on that file on your machine, on your hard drive, if you're in court from your phone. You're obviously almost certainly not going to be completely up to date with all the security patches and all the security mechanisms you need to put in place. You need to embed inside of your law firm to make sure that you are secure and that you are compliant. And finally, if you actually looked at the numbers for any kind of decent hardware and decent setup, you're going to be spending a lot of money. So Gartner figures, and this is 2013, so that was the latest I could find. But Gartner figures that for a typical 5-user firm, you're probably a firm is usually paying somewhere around $40,000 for all its technology needs. That's total cost in, right? Total cost of ownership, and that includes, of course, getting all the software, getting all the hardware, getting all the licenses, and someone to keep it going whenever it fails. So Abacus Private Cloud, also known as APC for short, allows you to put any application anywhere all the time in your desktop environment, in your cloud desktop environment. It has complete security, endpoint, network, and compliance. We are HIPAA compliant, and you'll see there's a slide later on that describes all of our compliance standards. We've been through the ringer already, know exactly what needs to be done. It's fully supported and runs 365, 24/7. Disaster recovery and business continuity is baked in. Essentially, look at it like a CIO, right? We are the CIO as a service. We're your chief information officers. We will keep the engines running, and we will keep the trains arriving on time, and such that you can focus on law, not on the state of your service. Deployments can be scaled, so depending on how big you are, we can give you a bigger server or a smaller server. You only have one throat to choke. We will take on, as I say, all of the aspects of your desktop, all of the licensing, all of it. So if you have a problem, you come to one vendor. That's one of the key differentiators between ourselves and some other DaaS providers. We have data centers in Vegas, in Phoenix, in San Diego, Houston, and London. And the important point here is, of course, your data will stay in the US if that's what you want. We are very, very aware and very sensitive to data sovereignty. And kind of importantly, for your accountants especially, this is a 100% operational expenditure, not a capital. There's no CapEx, which means, of course, that it's tax deductible. This is a pretty little picture of what it all looks like. Won't spend too much time. The key bit here is that we allow you to run any application as it shows in the cloud in the middle at the bottom, and that we provide you a set of virtual desktops, one for each one of your users, and that environment is complete and has everything you would ever possibly want, and we can add, as you request more applications, we add, and we manage them ourselves. So security and compliance, we are compliant with all the important requirements, or all the important compliance standards out there. We will do all sorts of SCADA and critical infrastructure analysis. We encrypt everything on disk. Everything at rest is encrypted. We test weekly and daily for legal protection against security breaches. We do biometric authentication at our data center sites. We provide host-level monitoring, so we know before you do if there are problems happening on one of your machines, and we'll take steps to rectify it. We do vulnerability assessments and penetration testing. So again, we make sure that your data is secure and that your applications will continue to work at all times. We're also a Tier 1 Microsoft partner, which means that we provide Office 365 and we provide the support. So we don't pass it along to somebody else. We are, again, one throat to choke, one person, one vendor. We're the ones that you call if there's a problem with your Office 365, and we're the ones who will fix it for you. We will do full admin and support. We can do all sorts of exchange functionality, some like e-discovery or encrypted emails, which we highly suggest. We host it, and we can provide SharePoint implementations if you need that kind of functionality. So, in a word, APC is a fully managed solution. We do everything. If you moved into the cloud, into the private cloud, you would have everything you have now, but less. Less ache, less worry, less fear, fewer threats. We are future-proofed. We are all continuously upgrading our equipment, continuously upgrading our software to make sure that we remain at the forefront of the technology curve. We provide you one predictable price and one single vendor